So yeah, I'll just say a final quick welcome to everybody. We're going to record the webinar obviously today, all about building on the financial basics thinking that we've been doing. We ran a session a number of weeks back around the basics that Gurj here is going to do a quick recap on for anybody who didn't attend that, just to cover some of the elements that we thought of and give a bit of a refresher on those before we get into some more in-depth finances and taking on board what people said around wanting to better understand how to build their sort of Excel spreadsheets and accounts in a more manipulatable way so that you can project things for the future. Today's really all about getting into the thick of how you can set up good financial practices for the future and use them in a way that can help you scenario plan, cash flow forecast and manage your budgets. So Gurj will kind of probably quickly talk through for anyone who's arrived a little bit later, kind of the overview of the session. But yeah, welcome to Gurj. Thanks again for doing the follow-up session, and we hope that this session funded by Manchester City Council is going to be another good one. So welcome to everyone that's here, and as I've said in the chat, do pop your details in and let us know a little bit more about you if you're happy to share details on what you're running and how you want to share your contact details. So Gurj, over to you. I will chip back in a while.
Thank you very much, guys. First and foremost, welcome, and I'm glad everyone's here and taking the time out. Really appreciate it. Secondly, I know that this can be a very terrifying subject for people, and that the whole point of this session is really to demystify that, to increase your confidence, and hopefully build in a sense of methodology around the budget, especially the budget creation process, because once you have that as your platform, you can use it and begin to manipulate it in different ways. So that it can help you become your friend. You know, the whole idea about the budget is it's not something to be scared of, and I think that's something that a lot of people can be, whether it's the creation of it or whether it's the management of it. But the budget can really literally can be your best friend, and not that distant cousin that you really don't want to see ever, and you just kind of avoid. It's that thing which will help you right now in the current climate as well. We mentioned this last time. Obviously, budgets and forecasts are undergoing revisions at virtually all levels across all industries and sectors because of the unprecedented times that we're living in. So this is incredibly current, and for all of you who are here today, there are a lot more people out there in the background who are literally just trying to work with them. So we hope that you go away with it from this session with an idea that you are stronger on budgets, have a greater understanding, or if you have any particular individual questions, you can feed those through to us. And obviously you can put any specific questions onto the chat and we can pick those up afterwards as well. So that's not a problem. I'm going to begin, if I can, just with the slideshow. So I'm going to share, I'm just going to share this here and we're going to get this up to a slideshow. So hopefully you can all see the PDF, the PowerPoints.
Yeah.
Yep. Brilliant. So obviously we've done a hello and the welcome. Ideally, there's some familiar faces, which is really good to see. I see people that were on part one, so welcome back. And if you're new, welcome for the first time. We wanted to try and get an idea, as we said, for who you are and what you want from the session. So please put that into the chat so we can try and tailor throughout the session as much as possible questions and answers within the scenarios we're using to help answer those questions. And obviously, as Michaela just said, please feel free to share the website or email addresses because it's a networking platform as well. So please don't forget that. I mean, so with budgets, I want to go over what they are. And these are slides that we used in the first session. So if anybody's missed that, they can also speak to Michaela and see if they can get the recording or the details from her. But they're vital. As we just mentioned, they're a vital tool for understanding business performance. And they're a vital tool for recording your assumptions. And when you say assumptions, it seems like a far less scary word than forecast, to be fair, because that's all a forecast is really. It's their assumptions on what you believe are going to happen in the future. The budget offers a business structure and it enforces strategy and discipline, which is why whether you're working for yourself, whether you're a small enterprise or whether you're a large multinational, the budget provides you with a focus for what you're hoping to achieve within a given time period. It allows you to build a strategy around it, and the discipline is in working to achieve that or working to understand what's affecting it. And it's important for the use and the acquiring of funding and also to help people have confidence So just so that you're aware, my current role, I work for the Church of England, and the Church of England currently are having to do 2 to 3 year forecasts on cash flow and their budgets, just for the auditors, just to prove that they know where their income's going to be coming in from and how their cash is going to be structured. So it becomes quite important for people, external investors, and also boards, shareholders and other stakeholders to know where you are. We've just mentioned why they're important, but they're important for all the various reasons that you see on the screen. For cost behavior analysis, as you'll see with the scenarios, they'll give you an idea of where you expect your costs to be. The same with income. They allow you to evaluate. They give you a position in terms of where you think you'd be, and then you can measure against that where you are. It's motivation. So if you have income targets, or if you have cost targets that you're hoping to achieve, they're used as motivation for yourself, for your team. It's information sharing, because it shares a strategy, it shares the outcome and where you expect to be as a business. There's an expectation that's set by the budget, which is hoped to be maintained. Strategy delivery. So if you have a particular product, item or service you're hoping to deliver, it helps you deliver that, or it helps you understand where there may be shortfalls in income. And it provides you with clarity, because it gives you an idea about where things are going to be. And that's why it becomes your friend. The whole idea is the budget is there to help you put down on paper and within a set format an idea of what the future may hold for the business in terms of its incomes and expenditures, so that you're able to see potential pitfalls, and you're also able to see the positive upswings that you will have from business. So that also covers a problem identification element of it. So it does serve to highlight where there may be issues or where there may be opportunities to exploit. The budget work through, which is what we're going to do shortly. The key things to think about: treat the creation like a science. It sounds really weird, but really the workings and the assumptions and the backing. Once you have that to a certain level, you're able to obviously incorporate that into your budget. But if somebody asks, where does that number come from? You're able to very clearly say, it came from here. It wasn't something I dreamt overnight, or it wasn't on the back of a fag packet, or it wasn't a conversation I had with somebody in the pub. Literally, this is what we think is going to happen. And that can only be a guesstimate. Very often when it comes to income, very often when it comes to starting a new project, you're not able to really identify how the market's going to react or what's going to happen. In which case, obviously, you can collate as much information as you can, and often that's all it is. So I think a lot of people work very hard to try and get the budget fully exact. We said this last time, whenever you read the news, and you hear about big corporations and you hear about retail, and in the past year, even pre-COVID, the high-end food industry and the retail industry, such as Debenhams and John Lewis, all these store closures and everything else which are happening, they're happening because the original budgets weren't met, and different circumstances are affecting the business. That doesn't mean that when the original budget was put together, it was wrong. It just means that when it was put together, it was based upon the best information at that time. Nobody could anticipate COVID. So you just got to remember to give yourself a bit of slack. People tend to worry about getting this completely right. People who get paid lots and lots and lots of money were at the helm of businesses that went bankrupt or fell apart. And so, and they were paid specially to do this. So it just takes that pressure away, because nobody can get this completely right or accurate. We mention the keyword granularity, and I say it's a keyword because what it means is within understanding your income or within understanding your costs, you get back to a unit, a basic unit level. From that basic unit level, you can build those blocks to say, if I sell X amount of units, the cost will be this much. If I want to manufacture X amount of units, the cost will be that. And we'll get onto that within the first part of the budget, so you'll be able to see how that works from the workings. And lastly, it's to build and challenge and ensure you record assumptions and workings. So when we start doing the scenario analysis, we're going to be looking at building the budget for the year, and then looking at the budget after we've had 3 months worth of trading to see if the marketplace has changed or anything else has changed within any of the services that we buy or consume. So that's important too. How to approach it? If I'm honest, we've mentioned that obviously you want to approach it as a science, but you also have to be honest. You have to gather as much information as you can, but you have to be honest about it. I've seen people put budgets forward for sales and regional areas, and they're like, we're going to sell this many units. And you just go, really? So you have to be objective. There's no harm in having a third person test your assumptions. There's no harm in having somebody else look at it. And there's no harm in just checking to see how other people in your same sector, if there is a sector wide enough that other people who will share information, feel about their budget and feel about their position. Thirdly, supply logic. If you need to set up 2 sites, you also need to budget for the cost of transporting items and goods from one site to the other. You can't simply miss out elements of costs or elements of income that don't necessarily, that you will incur, that you will come across. So often people do a budget, but they miss out huge chunks and they go, right, yes, but we're going to sell this many units. Right, but it's going to cost you how much to buy them in, how much to store them. You're going to have the insurance for them. You're going to have to maybe hire some staff. You're going to maybe have to do some additional work on them. And it's about being, again, logical and honest. Start early and build across multiple phases. You're not going to get it correct in the first draft. Secondly, you don't want to overcomplicate it by doing multiple drafts, because you could be here forever, really, just drafting budgets out so that they look fantastic. And that's also pointless, because as we mentioned, aside from the costs which you know are fixed, everything else is an assumption, and you can't really beat yourself up about getting that fully correct all the time. So normally with companies, what I tend to do is 3. Sometimes if it's a bigger company and there's quite a lot of different stakeholders or people feeding in, maybe 5 times, and then that's it. But 3 tends to be the magic number, because what you do is you start early and you build your draft, leave it, and then come back and say, right, how do I genuinely feel about that? Has anything changed? Does that look right? Maybe I was incredibly emphatic the night that I did that. Now I feel probably a bit more realistic about it. So it's about approaching it in different ways. And when you go to any, especially the bigger companies who've got formats and people who do this for a living, and they have departments that manage these functions, they will do that and they will start building across phases. It's very rare for people to build a budget in one clear go, and for them just to be happy with that. Save all the workings, as we mentioned, calculations and assumptions, because if anything, it challenges your reality. You may have had an idea or a thought about how something was going to come across, how something was going to be in terms of its cost or its income. And then you literally may look at it again when you're redrafting and go, well, maybe I was a bit out there. If you've got your workings and your assumptions, instead of being thrown out about where that came from, you can at least challenge it. If you have quotes for anything that you're going to be buying from people, you can use those as a basis. If you've got actual costs that you've incurred over the past 6 months or over the past year that give you an idea, then that also works. A great example here is if you think about your own energy bills, you're hoping that if your usage stays the same as last year, as long as there isn't a tariff change, you're hoping that the amount that you're going to be paying out on your energy bills is going to be the same. So if I asked you to personally forecast how much you thought you're going to be paying for gas and electric with no changes to your usage, you'd say, right, well, my bills last year were X, and that's the basis for the future year. So it's about using information where you do have an idea, and that forms your assumptions. Okay, again, what we did last time and what we've got in the example is a list, really, and I can't stress sometimes how helpful this is in being able to understand all of the aspects of the organization, all the aspects of the good or service you offer, is taking a list of every single item, everything that you do, every single particular about it, as you'll see in the example, and classifying it under income and expenditure. So basically making a list and next to it going, or even highlighting it going, this particular color is income, this particular color means that this item is expenditure. And then you form a list and you can see where within the budget it's going to sit. We talk about granularity, and this helps to be able to understand if an item is an income or an expenditure. Sometimes you may have an income line and some people net the cost off, they take the cost out. I'm pretty much against that, because you then lose the visibility of how much that cost is and how much it's fluctuating, and if it changes for you. The whole point about granularity is it gives you complete visibility over every aspect of your budget. And sometimes if you marry the two, so sometimes on an income line, you could buy a product and then you could take the cost of buying it out and just put the actual cost of selling it in a really awful basic way. it would really confuse matters because you wouldn't get an idea of how things are performing. That will become clearer in the example as we run through. The other thing is within your budget is when you're looking at your assumptions and you're looking at an understanding of how things are going to fit and fix, it's about appreciating whether the actual costs on the expenditure are fixed, semi-fixed or variable. In the example we run through, that's part of the classification process on the list. If something is a fixed cost, such as your rent, or if you have a mortgage on a commercial property, or if you have insurance or a higher cost, which you know is going to stay the same, then you can budget for that securely, knowing that that hopefully won't change. If you have agreements in place with these suppliers, or an agreement in place with venue hires, or maybe a hot desking situation that you're using, you can at least budget for that securely without knowing that it won't change, and that is a fixed cost. Semi-fixed costs, as in the examples, sometimes can be your utility charges, where you have an element of it which is fixed, like the standing charge, and then the rest is based upon your usage, so that is a variable element to it, so that there's a portion which is fixed and a portion that is variable. And then the variable costs are, as we mentioned, completely variable. In the example that we use, we have volunteer expenses. Now, it depends upon how often a volunteer is used, or how much work a volunteer actually conducts, in terms of how much of their travel and time expenses they may wish to have reimbursed. That's completely variable. For example, a lot of things within COVID-19 structure were fixed. So some people's rents and rates were fixed. Yes, they could negotiate around them, but within their budget, they would have gone in as a fixed charge. Other elements such as mileage and travel, which have now just been stopped for a lot of companies, are considered variable costs. Again, hopefully this will all come clearer in the example as we run through it. Right, so I'm just going to move across to the Word document so that we can start seeing
Fab.
seeing this.
Cool. And I was just going to let people know while you're pulling this up, good, that the plan is if people have got questions and so forth, they're very welcome to put those in the chat. Ones that we can field as we go, we will. Otherwise, there will be time for a Q&A conversation after the kind of theory bit, after the science bit. But feel free to put questions or any key things that you're wanting to know in the chat, and we'll attempt to answer those.
Of course. And the other thing I was going to say as well, just because I appreciate timing, is I'm going to run through the first part here, part one. And then after part one, I'm just going to suggest literally like a 5-minute comfort break, and just a break for everybody so that they can just have a bit of time away from the screen as well. And then before we hit back onto the third and second and third parts, because I'm conscious of how potentially how much information is here. It can be a lot to take in. So I will aim to run through this. But for those of you who were there in part one, we did run through this example. I've modified it ever so slightly to add in a few more lines, but I just want to run through it, and then we'll see how the template works. So Company A basically is a yoga studio. It's run by a team of 3 friends who also are the executive directors, as we'll see further on, and it currently employs 1 instructor. It wants to produce an income expenditure budget for 2020. It's only been running for 6 months, so it does have 6 months worth of expenditure and cost behaviour to understand. And it runs itself in the city from 9 to 5, and it runs for 48 weeks in the year. So it's closed over some holiday periods, but it also means that also means we're working on 4-week months. Now, the maximum number of students it can hold in the studio is 30. And in the last 6 months, each class has averaged 18 attendees, and it's been popular. So that's the key thing. Now, in the key detail, we mentioned about making a list of all of your items. So that's really what we have here. So in the key detail, it runs 2 classes in the day, each 1.5 hour long. The class costs £8 to attend. There are no discounts. 2 personal offered, so you can have a one-to-one session. And then 3, merchandise is also sold to at the studio to members. And there's a table underneath which details the item of merchandise individually, the price individually, and what they believe their forecast monthly sales will be based upon the last 6 months. So that gives us an idea of what we can use for the budget. So further down, the friends who run the studio are executive directors. They're paid £500 each per month, and they're subject to national insurance at 13.8% for the employer, and obviously auto-enrollment pension at 3%. So we're using rough ideas. Auto-enrollment pensions can differ, but that's just where we are in this example. There are 2 additional non-exec directors who provide wider strategic support, because I understand the structure very much in this particular industry is like that. And there's also a team of volunteers that they will use on an ad hoc basis. All of those items there that we've just discussed are all effectively their staff, but all the items that we've seen from 1 to 3 are really income. They're all income. So the income from the sessions that they're in the studio, the personal sessions, and the merchandising. The detail underneath obviously is there. It's important for us to be able to understand the staff cost. Point 4, the cost of the instructor is £9 an hour basic. Again, the instructor is subject to employers' NI, national insurance, and also auto-enrollment pension 3%. Point 5, the cost of the studio, the rental is £12,000 per year. That's an expenditure, but it's fixed. The last 6 months' utilities have been as below: water £120 with a standing charge of £30, electricity £300, standing charge of £24, and then gas £150 and a standing charge of £18. That's expenditure, but semi-variable, as we've discussed, because a standing charge you're going to incur regardless of whether you use that utility or not. The insurance for the studio is £1,200 per year, and the equipment is provided to students. It regularly needs to be repaired or replaced. So in the past 6 months, 25 mats have been either stolen, just because I guess people are like that, and damaged beyond repair. It is estimated this will extend to 45 mats, which again is a variable expenditure because we don't know that. It's estimated that's what's going to happen there. They're basing it on an assumption on what they know. The cost of each mat is £4, but they also build in, and this is something which is important in budgeting, we mentioned it before, they build in a contingency. So they buy new mats, but each time they buy new mats, they have a 20% contingency because they know they could be damaged, stolen, broken, or they could just not be usable. And it's important to understand the significance of contingencies, because part of scenario planning is to say, even if I have an exact number, I'm not sure how things may change. And if I think there's going to be a fluctuation, I can add 5% or 10% onto that so that it will build in that expectation. Its budgeting year runs from January to December for 48 weeks. So we know the actual structure. And then volunteer expenses for community volunteers or non-exec directors is an expenditure, but it's variable. So that's all the information that we have. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this, and we're going to show you how this would look in the budget template, but also with the working, so we can see how all the information that we've gleaned there is then used to produce workings and assumptions, and then used to be put into a format of a budget, so you can visually see in numbers how that's going to come out and how much cash you expect to make in the month, and also how much your costs are going to be in the month and the total bottom line. So I'm just going to shift across to the Excel sheet.
Great stuff. And I know we've had one question so far, whether it's relevant as you start doing the template, because I know you're showing us that scenario that you just walked through, but we had some feedback last time on actually putting the thing together, which you're going to show people. The question that's come in that may be able to talk about as you go, or we can say for the Q&A, was around showing VAT in a budget.
Okay.
But,
okay.
You cogitate on that as you go. No,
absolutely. I know within the scenarios that we've pulled in, we haven't necessarily included that, but I can talk around that by all means, and I can answer any questions on it if needed.
Fine,
yeah. So we mentioned this before. This is effectively just the budget workshop template. So this is the framework that we're going to use. From the information that we're told that obviously we know that there's incomes, we know there's expenditures. So we've set this up so that you can see the two different sections. We know that their year runs from January through to December. So you can see on the top menu scroll bar that's marked out. There's also obviously a grand total, so you can see how much it's going to be for the year as a total. Now, when putting this together, I'm obviously within Excel, the template is then malleable. So if it depends how confident you are, but I guess it's just really a grid at the moment. What we've done is separated income, marked it up as A, and then when you get to row 21, you have the totals. Now in these cells, I've put in a very simple calculation figure, which basically sums all of the items above. So if I press F2, you can see that it goes blue, and you'll see that everything that I enter into the above cells will be picked up to give me an idea of what the total income is. Because it runs from January to December, we're also told that obviously it's a monthly budget. we split them out to showcase a budget in terms of income and expenditure on a monthly basis, so we can see each month what's happening. I've done the same underneath, so we've got an open table to complete and compile for all of the expenditure, and what you'll see in row 35, which is highlighted, is the same thing. As you see, if I highlight that, it's a sum, so any numbers which I feed into the cells above, it should automatically total. And then the cell below looking at the income, and then as you can see the highlighted blue cell, and it minuses the red cell. So it takes expenditure away from the income to give us an idea of what our either surplus or deficit will be within that particular month. And those formulas are consistent and they carry on across right until the end, so that the same thing happens with the total lines for the year. And it's important when you have the format, and this is really the key, when I talk about the creation is like a science, is to build something or have something which allows you movement, because you may add further lines. So having something which gives you room to add further lines, grow and build without being too difficult is key. So we've got quite a lot of space in there at the moment, but if you wanted to insert more rows and we wanted to add more lines in there, it'd be easy to do. It's easy to manage rather than starting all over again.
And good.
Yep.
Mention as well, there'll be some people that know this stuff, and there'll be people that don't, which is why we're kind of covering it. But you can either physically type in equals sum, C whatever to, you can physically type it in, or there's a little auto sum tool that if you just want to scroll up to the top, Gurj, to show. Sometimes you can highlight a whole bunch of, you can highlight down the column and to create that auto sum calculation.
Yes, you can. And I think on the chat, someone's actually put some good links to some of the Excel kind of tutorials, I think either on YouTube and other videos. But as I say, in particular to budgets, we can run through this. I'm just conscious of people who aren't necessarily au fait or overly confident with it at the moment. So that's a budget template as it works. We're now just going to move on to the budget working. So we're going to work through everything that we can see. So this is what we didn't get a chance to really cover in great depth last time. What we've done is workings as per the marked key points. On the Word document, we had all the key points that we looked through and we were given detail. What these do is they build the assumptions and they give us the idea about working out a granular amount. We want to represent the detail on the budget on a monthly basis. So it's important that we can take the information that we have from a daily or a weekly basis to formulate a monthly total. So what we have here from the information given is that the amount per session is £8. We know that the number of students, the maximum number of students that the studio can hold is 30. That's full capacity. But we know that the average over the last 6 months has been 18. So pounds per session is the amount that they would recover per session. So it's £240 on full capacity, and on an average capacity, it's 144. The average capacity is what they've seen, but the average capacity is also a bit more of a prudent measure of the income. You're downplaying that income slightly because you're not saying that the expectation is going to be high and overly met. So what we're going to do in this example is take the average capacity, because that's physically what we've seen. So that follows what actually seems to happen. Here on the right-hand side, what you'll see is as I move across, the per session cost taken from that calculation is 144. We know that there's 2 sessions run per day, so that makes it 288. And if you can see in the top menu bar, you'll see the formula that just says equals that cell times 2, multiplied by 2. Then weekly, we know that it runs Monday to Friday, so we know there's 5 sessions, 5 days that it operates, and there's 2 sessions per day. So that gives us a weekly amount. And then what that gives us here in H is an annual amount of income that we're expecting from the sessions. And from that, we can take a 12th and we get a monthly amount. So we're able then to understand what the monthly value is going to be on the budget in what we expect to receive if these sessions were being met with the average number of attendees every single week in the month, across 2 sessions. So that gives us 5,760. If we go across to budget template A, this is the completed budget that we filled in. As you can see, the income from studio sessions each month now is 5,760. So we know that we've understood that assumption. We've based it upon calculations, past experience. So we're able to put a monthly amount in there. because we're not given any information. And the other thing about putting the budget together, it's only as good as the information you have. We're not given any information about seasonality or dips or falls or anything else like this. So we're assuming a consistent level of activity across the year. But that's where the 5,760 comes from. And at the end, you've got your total here of 69,120. And that's as expected. That ties back to your annual working total in your workings.
Good. I was just going to say as well, we had a quick in the chat, but we are going to share the template and open.
Yes.
So you will get this to kind of look at the cells and play about with and use the blank template to use if you haven't already set this kind of budget setup up. And I guess we've got a mixture of people here. Some people will have already have these sorts of things set up. Other people will be learning, thinking, oh, actually, I could adapt that or I could change that. And for those who have kind of already got this stuff set up, there's a couple of scenarios we're looking at shortly to look at kind of adapting to new scenarios, be they COVID related or otherwise. So stay tuned for that. And I'll, sorry to chip in there, good.
Don't be silly. Don't be silly at all. So what I've done is I'm just saying the personal sessions we're saying, so I've literally just put that through there in the formula. We're saying the weekly session, personal sessions, the amount per session is £10. And we're going to say the number of students that they have per week is 20. So per week session, we're going to say they take £200. Now, if you go across to this table, we're saying per week it's 200. Again, per week it's there. So monthly it's going to be £800 because we've got 48 weeks in the year that they work for. And obviously the 48 divided by 12 months is 4 weeks each. So we know that that's going to be £800. So what happens is when you go to budget template A, you'll see that that's now obviously populated with the £800 per month that we expect to get in from running the personal sessions. And that comes in and that totals up. So that gives us an indication of that particular income. I'm then going to go back to work because then on the income side of it, we're going to work through the merchandising. Again, if you go through the example here, we've been given a table. They've been very kind to give us a table on that, on the information. They gave us the fact that each item, the price per item was £10 for the t-shirt, 15 for the yoga pants. You'll have to. I've never bought yoga pants in my life, so I had to literally just guess at an amount there. I really apologise. And £8.50 for bamboo hot drink mugs because I believe that's the in thing now as well, and they're reusable. So they've given us forecast monthly sales. So based upon we were reporting for the month, so that's quite an easy calculation for us to say, right, it's £10 per item. We're expecting to sell 50, so we're going to have £500 per month in sales for the t-shirt. And for the yoga pants, 685 for the bamboo hot drink mugs. So when we go back to the budget template again, we've got those monthly workings. We can feed those in per month so we know exactly where we expect to be. I appreciate that this is a simplified model and we're making lots of hypothetical assumptions here that the performance will be consistent throughout the year because that isn't typical. But what we're doing is we're basing something for the start of the year. So we're trying to give the company a budget for the full year ahead.
And good, just to kind of throw in, obviously this is, there are various types of businesses out there. Some are more product and retail based. Some of them are more service based. And I guess in your version of this, your income might look like income from contract A, income from contract B, income from, one-to-one sessions. What we haven't put in here, which others will have, grant, lottery grant or local, area grant. So those will all be listed in there. And as Gurja said before, the more you can granulate those down into items, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole reason for the granularity. If you were just taking merchandising as one big band and just had that as an income line, but you were selling a multitude of different items, you wouldn't know which particular item was working for you. So it's clear that based upon their understanding and their assumptions within the forecast here under merchandising, we can see that t-shirts seem to be really good and a good seller. We believe that, yoga pants seem to be good, but bamboo mugs aren't doing just as well. So maybe they want to focus a bit more on doing another line of t-shirts or separating that out, for example. It gives you an idea about how things are performing. And then as per the template that we discussed, the row 26 in grey, you can see gives us an idea as a sum of all the income above, and it tells you that we're going to hopefully be making £7,745 in the month based upon running the studio sessions, the personal sessions, and selling the merchandising. So that gives us a clear idea about how much money we're hoping to get in. Obviously, we believe it's going to be consistent throughout the year at the moment, so because we don't have any other information. So I'm going to move on to the staff costs and populating those into the budget. And we know that obviously there's executive directors. We know that there are 3 executive directors at £500 each. That keeps it simple. So we know that's £1,500 that they receive. And then,
and in some places, Gurge, we're just going to play devil's advocate there, and it might be that for some, you break that into the 3 individual directors.
Yeah.
You might end up working more hours than others and so forth. So you can break that down.
If there was a difference, we've kept it really simple here, but because they're all paid a flat fee of £500, like a flat salary fee, we've kept it at 500. Kayla's right. If it was based upon a timesheet element and there were 3 separate people, you'd separate the staff out. As you can see on budget template A, we've also separated out the yoga instructor because obviously they're separate in terms of what they do and how they're calculated. And I'm just going to go back to the workings and I'm just going to minimize this. So we've got here under expenditure working for, because it's 0.4 on the original Word document, so we're trying to keep it coded up. We've got an idea that the instructor cost is £9. The time is 1.5 hours per session, so it's £13.50. We know here that per session it costs £13.50 basic costs for the instructors' wages. We know that per day there's 2 sessions, so that's twice. Weekly that's £135. Monthly it's £540. So what we do is we put £540 there because we're representing on a monthly basis, so we can see that. We're also told that for the executive directors on their fixed salary of £500 each, and whatever the yoga instructor earns based upon the number of sessions they run, there's national insurance that as an employer, the studio has to pay, because obviously there's a responsibility, and there's also an auto-enrollment pension. Now, I've just marked in here, and within the format, when we talk about granularity, you can split the lines on income and expenditure as you wish, and you can put in detail there to help you, because this isn't something that's always for other stakeholders. Ideally, it's to help you direct the course of the business, direct the course of what you're doing, and see how things are going to pan out. So make it as useful as possible for yourself. And there's also not to say that you just need to keep one particular version. So as we'll see when we start revising the budget, you can have one version which you use for yourself, which can be quite detailed. And if a bank or a funding body or a grant-making body wants to see details, and they don't want to see it in such specific and granular details, you can basically represent it in a different way, but make sure the totals tie up. But for your own use, make it so that it is useful to you. And just going back onto, so obviously what we've done here, I've put a calculation really here for the national insurance. And again, we can run through this, and there's also lots of other tutorials on how to do this separately. But effectively, all I've done is to say, I know that the executive director's basic wage and the yoga instructor's basic wage summed up are subject to 13.8%. So what I've done there is I've done a sum for the 2 values above, which represent their basic costs, and then I've just multiplied that by 13.8%, which obviously digitally is represented by 0.138. I've done a similar calculation here for the pensions, just at 3%, so that if and when these were ever to change, the national insurance and the auto-enrollment, which will always stay a percentage of what we pay, would automatically adjust, so that you wouldn't have to be recalculating all the time. So that's the staff costs as we have them. The fixed costs, we know that the studio rental is £12,000 a year, which works out to be £1,000 each month. So that's been populated there. For the water, we go back to the budget workings.
Good. In your scenario there, you linked the budget workings. I'm sure you'll show people that the kind of, but people can physically just type in £1,000. They can
type in, and I will be. So there's 2 different. Once you know what the monthly value is, you can type it in. Obviously, to make life easy for yourself, you can automate it just by linking it to your workings. That means if your workings change, then your template itself automatically picks up those changes. It makes life a lot easier. And in scenario planning, you could sort of play around with, what if my costs went up to this? What if my instructor was paid X? You can start playing around with those. But yes, absolutely, you can do it. Whichever way is comfortable for you is the best way to do that. In terms of automation and Excel, it's something we can kind of potentially pick up if there's enough demand on a separate piece or a separate session. But yeah, you're open to do it either way.
Okay.
Working 6, we're going to the utility. So we were told that there's 6 months worth of utility charges that they've experienced. So that's what we're going to use to say that's what we're going to have for the following 6 months, because we have no other information to base it on. And what we're saying is that the full year, if the half year incurred so far, we expect to be £120, then the full year should hopefully be double that, which is £240. So what we've done, quite simply, is to work out the cost, per session, per day, weekly, and monthly. So that gives us a monthly amount that we can then use for the schedule. So that's going to get populated here into budget template A. So you've got here 20, 50, and £25 for the utilities. The insurance, we know, is a flat £1,200, which works out to be £100 each month. Now the mats are slightly more complicated. So we're told that the number of mats that we need to have a 36 cost. The cost of the mat is £4. That's 144. The 45 comes from the fact that we need to have a contingency. So we're using that as 2 values because we need to buy mats in at 36 lots of mats for the class to make sure we have enough. And over the course of the year, we believe we're going to buy 45 mats in. I appreciate it's quite confusing. So we just need to get the monthly amounts for those. And using this table, we've been able to do that to work out what the annual value will be, and therefore divided by 12, what the monthly value will be. Now they've been populated again into the budget template A, so you'll see that. Underneath, there's a line here for volunteer expenses. We're told that volunteers obviously do help out, whether it's just helping to maintain the sessions, might be registrations at the sessions, might be anything else that they ask them to do, picking up or dropping off and deliveries. And the volunteers obviously wouldn't charge for their time, as wouldn't the non-exec directors, but they would be able to charge for travel expenses and other acceptable expenses. So we've got a varying level of costs in there, depending upon what they've claimed for in the month. And that's just an illustration about how that could vary depending upon how much they do. So we have a line in for that too, just so that we don't exclude it. What that gives us in grey here on line 46, if you follow it across, is a total expenditure. And you can see that by and large it stays pretty consistent. And then in blue underneath is your surplus or deficit. So that's giving you an idea of whether you're making money or not. And considering that's a positive number, that means because we're making £7,000, £7,745 in income in January, and it's costing us £3,625, so we're going to be making £4,120 in the month. So it gives us an idea about how monthly performance will be, and annually we're expected to make a profit, as you can see under the grand total here on the far side in column O, of 49,418. So that's effectively, given all the information, setting the information out into a budget template as we'd need.
Good.
So
I got one of the ladies is asking if you might just run through point 4 and 5 again, just how you calculated the workings of 4 and 5.
Sure, absolutely.
It just sounded a bit fast. It was the
no, not at all. So I'll go through working 5 first because that's relatively straightforward. And working 5 we've got here, we know that this is a fixed cost. So working 5 is your rental, for the space. And as per the point we said, the point that we were advised, we're told that it's fixed and it's £12,000 for the year. So in here I've marked out, we know that this is a fixed cost determined at the start of the year. We assume an equal monthly payment as no other information is available. Now, I've put text here. We're going to be able to share these workings after the session as well. But what you'll see in the text next to the workings and just there, putting down all of your thoughts, all of your assumptions, and everything that helps you get to that number is important. Because when I mention like keeping all of your workings, so here we're saying we assume an equal monthly payment as no other information is available. We don't know whether there's a higher amount paid up front. We don't know if it's split. We don't know if there's any other changes. And because of that, we're going to assume an equal monthly amount. If we're given information to the contrary or different, then obviously we can alter that. But based upon that, we're saying if it's £12,000 annually, it's a 48-week year. So we know there's 4 weeks every month. But obviously monthly, it's going to be the 12,000 divided by the 12. So it's going to be £1,000. So that goes in each month on line 36.
Cool.
And in terms of working 4, we've got details about the instructor here. So the instructor's cost is £9 per hour, but each session lasts an hour and a half. So consequently, the amount that we pay is 1.5 times 9, because obviously it's an hour and a half's worth of payment. That's the basic wage. And we're saying over across here in column L, per session, it costs £13.50 to pay the instructor. There's 2 sessions per day, which means that we're paying £27. There's 5 sessions in the week. 5 days in the week with 2 sessions every day. That's £135. And then monthly, that becomes £540. So that's the value that goes into the budget template here.
Great.
So hopefully that covers just point 4 and 5.
Yeah, thanks for rerunning through.
Not a problem. No problem. But that gives you your budget template just as a work through with your workings. And I can't emphasize enough, with the workings, they are yours. Sometimes, unless challenged or asked, largely in audit or some fundraisers and grant-making bodies might ask for an explanation, but you can always use this completely as your space to mark down all of your assumptions, your thoughts, your ideas behind where those incomes and costs will be and how they will pan out. And it's important to share all of that, because then you can always refer back to it. It's often very easy as well to come across calculations or come across assumptions, but not really put down where they came from or where that guidance came from. And you're often tracing those steps back afterwards. So it's really important, I guess, you record as much as possible.
And just to be honest and accurate, like you
absolutely.
said, give yourself the space to plan other scenarios, which I know we're going to look into in the next part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was a thing, we're talking about using it, the creation of it as a science. This is the scientific bit, really. You're doing this to say, right, based upon the information that I have, based upon the best information to my knowledge, and if you want it monthly, this is the monthly charge. And it's, I've worked for a lot of companies where sometimes but this will happen and that will, and you're like, well, we weren't told about this and we weren't aware of that. We can't make that assumption unless it's clarified to us. So the whole idea about being honest and logical is really important. You just sometimes have to be honest.
So what we've done, Gurj, because a lot of people that come to us sometimes, especially in the early days or even later on when they're planning bigger projects, they're like, oh, they don't know how to price things, or they don't know how, and without covering all of their costs in a similar way that you sort of outline here, and then without breaking it down into such small, detail, they can't then think, tailor their proposals or tailor their fees to the different requests that come in from different, whoever, commissioners, clients, or whoever else.
That's a really valid point, actually, a very valid point, because we've done the workings here based upon the information of an organisation that we know. Just a quick thing to mention is this will become really useful for you. If you're starting out or you want to provide a service and you want to understand what your pricing should be, then we've looked through the income side of things. So we've made a list of everything that we want, and we've listed it as either income and expenditure. But if you're not sure, just like Michaela's just mentioned about what your pricing should be, the other way to do it is to be honest about all of the expenditure you're going to incur in delivering that service, and then effectively breaking it down like we've done here from workings 4, 5, and 6 onwards. So we understand what the cost of hiring somebody would be. We understand the cost of our utilities. We understand the cost of the rents and rates and hire and the insurance, pardon me. And then what you'll have is, if you did that, you'd work out per month, for example, or even per week, if that's how you want to work, or per session, how much it would cost you to deliver that. And from there, you'd know how much you would have to charge simply to break even, and then how much you'd have to charge in order to make a specific profit. That's very much how the restaurant trade works. It works backwards. So when they produce a dish or when they produce a particular menu, they price up the cost of doing one particular dish, and they basically they take the cost of that, and if the cost of that is £1 in terms of all the ingredients, they mark it up by 60%. So it's that they know that they're making a margin on that to cover all the costs of the kitchen, the heat, the gas, and everything else like that. So by and large, you get some basic ways of doing it. And if you're unsure about what your income should be, and if you don't have a marker, so a yoga studio here, there might be yoga studio half a mile down the road that's really popular, and it might be a similar type of space, so they can see what prices they're offering. But if you're unsure about how much you need to charge as a price, then it's quite important sometimes to understand what the expenditure is, because if you understand what all of the expenditure is, you understand how much of the cost you need to recover before you start making money. And if your price is below that, that's a decision you have to take as to whether you're going to be able to manage it, or whether there's going to be any grants or subsidies, or whatever that shortfall may be. You'll be able to identify it. So going through these workings is quite important sometimes, just being able to arrive at that point.
And certainly good on the actual template itself. Obviously, this organisation of making a healthy profit, which
Yes.
I wouldn't say is impossible, but can be unusual. A, in
Yes.
startups, and B, in social enterprises. But I think through working through your scenarios like this, you'll soon see if you're going to make a loss by charging, or what you need to be increasing your cost by in order to break even, or in order to make a surplus.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough, that's exactly how it works. I mean, if someone comes forward with a new project, or if you have a particular idea, you've not really approached it, you really need to doing the workings here, which is a scientific bit, gives you an idea about what your costs are going to be, as we said, and from that you can determine your price. And I've actually sat in many meetings where people have come across and provided all the expenditures, and the price has been too high, it's not competitive, and we've had to literally just go, right, in other words, we're just going to nix that. We can't do it. It happens in retail all the time, because if something is too expensive and it's not going to sell in volumes, they don't really go ahead. But working through this will give you a clear idea about where you are, because often a lot of people they see the turnover, they see what the sales value for the item can be, and they go, this is brilliant, I'm going to make this much cost, but they don't really take into account all of the expenditure that it takes to deliver that. So often, and without doing this and without setting it out this way, you won't be able to see the fluctuations. And say, for example, if there was a massive drop in attendees, how that would affect the business and what you're hoping to deliver. And you see it all the time. And it happens all the time as well. The one anecdote I always use is from Morrison's, because Morrison's would always go through retail and look at a product, and people would come in, suppliers would come in, and it's a boiling hot day, so they'd come in with something like a brand new ice cream, and we'd be like, we're not going to sell enough of that for us for it to be viable, because us buying it from you, storing it, then transporting it across the country is our expenditure to give that to the customer. And in terms of all of that, we're not going to make money on it. So sometimes there might be a fantastic product that you don't see in the shelves, which could be available. And the other flip side of that is, if you've ever gone in and the item's not there anymore, it was people like me who were responsible, because we were just like, it's not making enough money, get it off the shelf. So it's really frustrating. But the only way that we were able to do that was by able to really keep a close eye on it. I'm going to stop now, because we're going to have a bit of a 5-minute break so people can get a breather, glass of water, etc. And I'm going to say that we reconvene. Is 2:05 too early, or is that okay with everybody?
I think with what we've got to get through and in time for a Q&A, that's probably about right. We're getting some thumbs up there, so that's great. And there are some questions and comments coming through, but we'll save some of those to have a bit more discussion about them in the Q&A shortly.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, guys. See you all in 5.
what I will say while people are on a bit of a break here, mainly for those who are sort of listening again, is that we do have a whole range of these webinars that we put together this summer. Manchester City Council recognised the need for sort of resilience and recovery strategies, and so we have put together a series of webinars over the last couple of months, a range of themes that from feedback we found were going to be of use to people, and we've certainly had well over a couple of hundred people attending our webinars and now starting to listen to those again. So this will be available through a listen again option on our YouTube channel that we've been forced to set up through COVID, and so there's sessions on achieving funding success, there's sessions on marketing and communications, there's a social business canvas session, and obviously there are these finance sessions, and there'll be a couple more that we add to those so that people have got access to those at their leisure, and they'll be freely available for the foreseeable future. I'm sure we're going to come back to this later. Dee's put in a good point there. You know, what is a reasonable salary to build in for yourself as a social enterprise? How long is a piece of string? You know, you can only build in able to earn, and we'll, as I say, we'll bring that up in the Q&A shortly. But for the first months or for the first few years, you might not be able to build in anything for yourself, depending on how you build your business, whether you're working on it part-time or full-time. And what I would say is, if you're at pilot stage, or you're not taking an income yet, more often than not, whether you're a social enterprise or a private business, you will be needing to put some pro bono time in. You know, it's highly unlikely that you can be taking a salary from day one. Especially you know, as a startup, but you have to work out for yourself, you know, what's the threshold? You know, is it a day a week I can give to this business in kind? Is it 2 days a week? Is it 5 days a week? You know, very few people can give 5 days a week to developing something unless they've got finances behind them. Maybe they've got a redundancy money, or maybe they've got a partner that can support them. You know, and in most cases, whatever your scenario, there comes a point where you have to build that salary. And so Dee's asking a good question there, and it comes down to working through your costs. You know, and it cost being, you know, what do you need to earn in order to run this thing? And we have run sessions before where, you know, you put out what all your personal finances are, what you know you need to earn a month, to cover all the bills and feed yourself, and you know, if you're lucky, be able to get a little break in the year, or whatever it might be, whatever your goals and whatever you're aiming for as a salary, based on what you have to cover, or based on what your previous salaries have been that you know you need to be bringing in, and then you have to look at what is it going to take in your business to be able to earn that, based on, you know, in this case the yoga scenario, based on the number of sessions you have to deliver to earn that, or the number of additional tutors you have to bring in, where there's a bit of a profit margin that comes back to you. So it basically comes down to working out your overall costs of living and working through some scenarios on how you might be able to earn that through your business, and that could be, you know, through selling products, selling digital applications, which I know is what you're looking at doing, selling workshops, carrying out pieces of research. You know, social enterprises make money in all sorts of ways, and we'll perhaps come back to that in the Q&A and some of the different ways that the businesses do. But costing it out in a nutshell is what you have to earn as a minimum, what you'd like to earn in reality, and can the business withstand that? And, you know, as an example from Flourish, you know, some of you may remember we were called the Women Supporting Social Entrepreneurs Network a few years back, and at that point in time we weren't taking a salary out of the organisation. We committed a day a week, I committed a day a week, Joe committed a couple of days a month to build this business, and so the any funds that we brought in or any income that we generated went directly back into covering the costs of developing our products and services. And so within a year or so, we were then able to start generating income from research that we were doing, generating income from one-to-one consultancy, writing some of the costs of our time into certain funding bids, and the income started to build from there. And I think often what I would say is don't undersell yourself, which is often what happens in social enterprises. And as a minimum, you should be charging whatever, 150 to 250 pounds a day rate in an idea. A lot of social enterprises that we work with tend to be service-based businesses. And I know this isn't necessarily a service-based business scenario, but it's good to see a broader picture really of some of the things that you could be thinking about as additional products and services to your social enterprise. And day rates anything from 150 to 250 if you're just starting out, and as you grow and as your expertise builds, or whatever the market will withstand. Typically consultancy rates, if you're offering consultancy, is anything from 500 to 800 pounds a day, or thousands. It depends what you're doing, but certainly in the private sector they're not charging 250 pound a day. So you just have to think about your basic costs of what you need to cover and what you think you can get away with. And when we've run sessions before on this, sometimes a good way to think about it is, in your marketplace, are you a corner shop? Are you an Aldi? Are you a Home and Bargain? Are you a Waitrose? Are you a food hall? They're all offering food and drink these places, but they've all got a very different margin, and they're all making very different kinds of profits, and they're all operating in different ways. So sometimes thinking of it like that is helpful. I'm just going to go and grab a quick glass of water, and then I think Gurge will be back ready to get cracking. I thought I'd just fill the time there with answering some questions. Gurge will be back with us.
Well, thank you. I was just going to say as well, in answer to that, Dee, I think it's just a case of, like Nicola said, it's just being, again, honest and logical about all the costs that you have, that you need to cover and that you want to cover, whether that's your living expenses. If this is going to become, your primary source of income that covers everything that you want to do, it's about saying, right, well, I need to cover all these expenses. Building in, for example, if you're going to be not in this day and age, you wouldn't necessarily be out and about visiting clients as much. You can do things remotely, but all the time. And also, if you do start consultancy, it's also a case of building in those rates that Nicola mentions also include prep time. So it's, if you're prepping things before you go to the meeting and before, it's building in that value. But what we've just done, in the budget working area that we've just looked at before we look at changes, is a case of saying, right, just be honest about it. Just make a list of all the things that you think are expenditure. How you come down with a total. You can break that down by month or whatever frequency you want. And then you have a target then to say, I need to hit this. That might be annual. You might actually make a list of all the expenditure and say, right, this is how much it's going to cost me within the year. So I know that across the year, I need to make this much to cover those charges. Because you might not be making a fixed amount per month, and it might fluctuate. But whatever you don't make in 1 month, you want to make up for in the next month. And it gives you a target to achieve. Because in these examples, I appreciate we are working on it's hypothetical, and we're working on this beautiful idea of consistency, which I think what my Latin teacher would say is ceteris paribus, everything stays the same. And I think it's just, that doesn't always happen. But we're doing it to be able to give you an idea. Of course, expenditures will fluctuate. And if you are consulting, the whole marketplace can fluctuate very quickly. So it's a case of just keeping that in mind. But you'll know then what your break-even point is. You'll know how much money you'll need to generate just to cover those costs, and anything above is effectively a bonus. And what you could do as well is, when you're pricing it, if you have that charge for the month, you know that for each session you charge, you're going to have to charge X amount plus a percentage. So you put a markup on there so you know you're making money. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. But the only way to get to it is, and this is a painful part of doing the budget process, it's literally collecting this information and it's being honest about it. That once you've got that, you might there might be an outcome that you don't know. But as we said before, it's problem identification. If you realize that 1 month you're not going to be making that much money, or it's not going to come through, or the project isn't viable, you'll know that isn't viable in that way. That might mean that you then go and find funding from an external body, or you apply for grants, or you do other things. Which help to
planning it in advance. You can plan in, and something that we haven't put in here, but I've done in other things myself, is there's no harm in putting in a sort of a grants line. Ideally, breaking these grants down into individual income lines that you know you've secured, but where you haven't secured grants yet or you don't know, it's a case of thinking, you know, what's a realistic figure for you, given the size of business that you're running, the size of social enterprise, charity or community organisation you're running, and given your experience in applying for grants, and given, you know, what's out there, you know, is it a few thousand, is it 5,000, is it 25,000, is it 150,000, and you can then pencil that in, and you'll be able to then see what happens with and without the grants, and where in the year they have to land, so that your cash flow stays buoyant or more steady. Anyway, I know you've got to get with the next
no, absolutely. No, that makes, yeah, but that, just want to reiterate, that makes perfect sense. I think that's what it's all about. It's about, we haven't put any lines in for grants or funding here because the example doesn't necessarily necessitate it. We'll see further on, because we look through a COVID example, how that works. But right, I'm going to move on to budget B. So we looked at the scenarios. I'm just going to quickly, I'm going to jump back to this, but I'm just going to quickly go share a screen, budget workshop. Right. So this is what we used before in order to understand what we had and what we needed for the organisation. And we're going to just jump here to part 2, so budget B. So we're going to incorporate a few changes to the budget that we produced first in budget A as below. And we're going to put those changes in, and we're going to revise the budget and set it up as budget B. So following the production of the budget above, and in the first 3 months of 2020, the following things occur. And this is a non-COVID example, so the COVID one will come after this. Number 1, the average attendees for all classes now changes to 15. The price for all classes dropped to £6.50 due to a competitor opening up. And the utilities charges are due to increase by 20% with immediate effect. So there's only a few small changes, but the whole idea is it's about getting comfortability with putting those changes in. So I'm just going to go back now to sharing this. I'm going to go to the budget template B. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up. So what I've done in budget template B is I've just basically copied the budget from budget A across. I've not changed anything. I've not done anything yet. We're going to work through those changes together, basically. What I've done based upon the information that's been given is I've just highlighted, I think that was probably a wrong highlight, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Sorry, bear with me. I've just highlighted in this pink color all the items that are going to see a change because of those conditions. And because we're seeing this 3 months in, there's no need to change the budget effectively from January to March because that's been expended. So we know that. And ideally, that's actually there. What we could do is we could populate that with actual, so we could see what the actual performance is. We're not doing that in this particular session. We're just looking to forecast for the rest of the year. So we want to produce a forecast which takes into account the changes that we are now aware of. So what I've done is I've just highlighted those two lines in pink. And the reason that is because we know the utilities are going to increase by 20% with immediate effect. So all of them is what we've been told. So we're going to assume that that continues for the rest of the year or until further notice. So that's the assumption that we have there. And I highlighted the income from studio sessions because that's based upon the number of attendees and the price per session. So that will also change as well. What I've done here is I've done two different ways of working this template. Up here on the top line, in line 9, I've linked this to the budget workings. So if you have a look at the top, it'll say equals budget working B, and it gives you a particular cell reference. Now, what I've done is I've fixed that cell reference. Something, again, you'll be able to see in final tutorials. But by doing this, it helps me massively because with the workings, so I've copied the workings across from budget working A, and I've copied them across into a new tab here for budget workings B. So we have all the workings that we need. Just going to go up to the top, and we're going to just change the workings here for the amount per session and the number of students, and that should feed through. So I wanted to show you how you can make the whole process quite simple if you have to make amends simply by changing the link and how that sits in place. So we know that these, we know that these three cells are fixed. So we're just going to fix those costs in because they're not going to change. But from here onwards, we want to see how that shifts because of the price difference and the attendee fall. So we've said that the amount per session was £8. We know that that's going to change to £6.50. So I'm just going to change that to £6.50. Bear with me. There you go. And the number of students, the average attendance was obviously 18, but we're told that that's going to fall, that's fallen to 15. So it's fallen over the first 3 months. We're going to change that. As you can see, I've got it on automatic calculate. So what it does per session, it tells me that that's going to fall to £98. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that value, copy and paste that into here. Bear with me, he says, and this is sometimes we'll type it in to make things easier rather than copy and pasting. And I said that per session, based upon £6.50 and 15 attendees, it's £98. So that's what we believe is going to happen going forward. We have no other information contrary to that. So we know that now per day, it's going to be 196 because this is automatically calculated, because this is all linked. And we know that weekly it's going to be £980. And we know that monthly, the income from the sessions will fall to 3,920. Now, due to the link, because I've linked the budget template to this particular cell, the change in the workings back here should feed through directly into this particular cell here. So you can see that it's already made the change. And because the link has been copied in, and I appreciate that's where the hard work and time goes in, that value is now altered all the way across. So we're able to put that assumption in quite easily and simply, and also without human error. As Kayla said, it's, you know, whatever you're comfortable with, you can always just type over the items, and I'm going to do that in the example below. But what this shows you is that you can actually then get a completely new sum. So compared to the 69,000 pounds we were receiving previously, we're estimating that now, with 3 months expended in the year, we're now only going to be receiving 52,560. So that drastically reduces, well, not drastically, but reduces the income. Everything else in terms of income is going to stay the same because we've not been advised differently. Staff costs are going to stay the same. We've not been advised differently. But here now for the water, gas and electric, we're told that these charges are going to increase by 20%. So this is the other way that you can amend the budget. So you could actually, if you've typed the figures in, so these figures aren't linked, they're just typed in hard copy figures, we can alter these with a particular calculation. So with the 20% uplift, what we're going to do is we're just going to say, in front of it, we're going to say equals, because equals prefaces what any particular formula, any sum, in Excel.
It's in the white bar at the top where you're typing in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the white bar on the cell, and you can see in the cell itself.
It's okay, but sometimes, you know, if you can't see for looking,
absolutely.
Can often
so if you look at a cell F37, you should be able to see the highlighted cell ring. You should see an equal sign before the 20. And then all I'm going to do is, it's the asterisk, which stands for multiply, and I'm going to do that times 1.2. So that's effectively 100. So you could do it two different ways. You could sort of multiply it by 120, divided by 100, but 1.2 as a decimal reflects a 20% uplift because you're multiplying it by 1 and then an additional 20%.
On 1.5 would be increasing it by 50% and so forth.
Exactly that. So we've done that to that one, and then we're going to do the same to this one, so we can see. And the same to here. So we're just literally altering it. And this is how you can play around with scenarios, because you can kind of go, right, if this was to happen from this point, or if this was going to shift at this point, or if it was going to be a reduction in tariffs, you could do it that way as well. And then the easiest way to, once you've done the calculation, because we know it's going to continue for the rest of the year, we can just take the cell and equal that cell. And we can just keep on doing an equal for the previous cell. That way, if you make a calculation difference in the first cell, it will feed through. And that just follows through. And I'm doing this manually, so I'm just going in, I'm over-typing the hard-copied number so that it picks up the cell from previous, so that the formulas feed through. Now, there's different ways, and people work differently in Excel. To be fair, I could just copy. So now you can see the moving lines around it. I've copied that particular cell, and I can highlight the full range, and I can just paste that formula in, and it will copy the formula because the formula is restricted to the cell. So I'm going to do the same here with this one.
And the other way is you can drag the little green box in the corner, can't you? That's the way I'll often do it.
You can. But I just wanted to show how when you link the cells, so this is another form of linking cells. So we've linked cells here to the workings. So we've got a sheet behind here where we can do all of the messy, complicated workings, put all of our text, write all of our assumptions. But, you know, this is a front presentation sheet. But we can also link this sheet together. So, for example, on this particular line for water, where I've linked all the cells together, if I was now to change this to 1.5, so we're saying that this is a 20% uplift, but like Kayla said, if we said that there's going to be a 50% increase, I could change this to 1.5, and all the other cells that are linked to it will also change as well. So it makes it a lot easier for you to kind of make those alterations, but also to get an idea how totals and things would shift. So part of the scenario analysis on a line basis within the budget template can work like this, because you can play around with how things would change if, you know, it was more expensive or it was less expensive based around that. But what we've done here on this particular budget now is we've enacted the changes that we're aware of. So we now have a revised budget. Now, when we did budget template A, we were told that the bottom line, I'm just going back to that budget now, was...
Sorry, George, what's happened to the personal sessions?
The personal sessions, we assume, just in this hypothetical example, we assume they stay the same.
Yeah, but they're not on your budget template.
Oh, sorry, apologies. Yeah, I think that is just due to this link here. Bear with me, and then that goes into there. Sorry. Well spotted, Morag.
I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correct.
No, you did, but that's exactly it. So that's the reason why having someone, that's a perfect reason for having something objective and having someone look over it and taking time away from it makes sense. And that's also sometimes just linking things is just making sure that that's where the hard work comes in. You have to do the link and check everything comes through, and you can build checks in, but overall it makes everything a lot easier for you. But no, thank you for that fantastic spot. So they stay the same. Nothing's going to change on the personal sessions in terms of the cost and the volumes. So they come through. And then what we're saying here is that's all fed in. And we're saying that now the profit for the year, based upon the change that we've revised on the utilities and also on the studio sessions, cost and attendance, is now going to be 32,687.
Unfortunately, in this happy, buoyant business, they can.
We want to be positive today, though, don't we?
Can't they? But in certain businesses, social, if that profit line had been, you know, only 10 or 15,000, it would suddenly start to show negatively, and that's when you start to think, you know, have we got bank loans in place to cover this, or have we got an overdraft in place to cover this, or we know we're going to start incurring some sort of loss in another 3 to 4 months. You know, are there grants or other options or other new services we have to come up with to mitigate that loss?
No, absolutely. This is a very happy, beautiful, really positive kind of example here. I appreciate that, but that's exactly what people are doing. And also the other thing is as well, from a cash flow point of view, companies will be holding reserves. If you're working as a CIC, you're working for yourself, or if you're working within the charity sector at least, you know, the given guidance is 3 to 6 months. 6 months is incredibly prudent and normally advised. Most companies go for 3 months worth of reserves. And like we were talking to Dee earlier, the way to do that, the way to work out what your reserve value is to work out what your expenditure is. And once you know what your expenditure is, either on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, or even for a half year, you then know how much money you need to cover those costs. And those costs would be for the business operating, for its fixed charges. Because if the business was to stop working, or like we've seen in COVID, if businesses weren't able to work in the same way that they were before, they wouldn't incur necessarily all their variable charges, but they still would incur all their fixed charges until they were negotiated. So reserves are based upon the idea of, would you still be able to pay out all of your debts? Would you still be able to cover all the costs that you are legally obliged to cover? So if you're working for yourself, and in that example where Michaela was talking about being able to cover your costs, if that was a cost of your mortgage or your rent, if it was a cost of, you know, all your bills and your travel expenses, then obviously you want to try and build a reserve from the work that you do, or have a reserve that covers 3 months of that, because if something doesn't happen or work dries up, you've got a backup for it. That's the other side to budgeting that I know we're just dipping into very quickly, but it's important just to kind of reinforce that. And I think over the next coming months, we're going to see a lot more on reserves. We're going to see a lot more of people utilising them. And I think January and February is going to be a different time altogether, to be fair. But a slight diversion, I apologise.
Move on to the final COVID scenario.
Yeah, but those are the changes that we make. So yeah, so that's budget template B. And before we move on, I'm just going to check here because the same thing's happening with that. I'm just going to check the link. So that's now pulling through budget template C. Right, that's perfect. So I'm just going to go back, stop share, and come back to the sheet. We're doing quite well for time here as well. So on the budget workshop, that was part B. So we've enacted all those changes, and we've now produced a budget to reflect those changes for the 9 months following where we were. And then we've got budget C. So budget C is to revise budget B. I think it's actually budget A carried forward for COVID-19 restrictions, which force a studio as a physical space to close from March 2020, actually from April, so March occurs. And the following occurs: the studio sessions close, so there's no further income from them, and that's for the foreseeable, or until further notice. The studio sets up a virtual Zoom session with subscriptions of £5 per session. The utilities are no longer incurred from March, but actually from the end of March, that is, so it's actually from April, apart from the standing charges. And a business interruption loan is applied for to cover the income loss from the studio sessions from April to July 2020. The volunteer expenses are taken out as they are not expected for the remainder of the year. And the executive directors take a pay cut of half from April until the end of the year, just to help support the business and remove the expenditure from it. So we're just going to work through those points now. And I'm just going to stop sharing this and go back.
Because I know a number of the people on the call here are at more of an early stage in the business development, rather than perhaps having been run 10, 20 years or having lots of employees and that sort of thing, we decided not to focus on furloughing and the furlough requirements and putting furlough into a budget plan. But if that was something that you needed to look at, if that was something that you are trying to work through, as Gurj will sort of let you know at the end of the session, he can follow up with people directly on a one-to-one for that, where they've got specific needs.
Yeah. Yeah, what we've done is, so we've taken, it's actually budget A, so we've taken budget A across, so this has all the details in, and under COVID, what we've done is, the first thing is we're saying that the income from the studio sessions is going to fall. So what we can do from April onwards is all the pink lines, just sort of the same as a budget template B, all the pink highlighted areas are the items and the lines which are going to be affected by what we've been told. So those are the points that we're going to work on. Everything else should remain the same. Because we're going to lose the income from the studio sessions, I'm just going to highlight all those and we're going to take those out. The income from the personal sessions, we're going to say has been moved online. So they're going to continue online because it's a one-to-one session. So they've just been moved to Zoom. We're going to have online sessions for groups as subscriptions. We've been told that they're going to have subscriptions and for £5, but obviously with it being on Zoom and with it being a much wider reach, they're going to be able to reach more people. So we've got some workings for this, and these are just based upon assumptions that we may have. So if you look here on the screen, we've got the amount per working one. That was a detail that we had, which gave us our monthly amount as from budget A and those workings. Underneath, I've just set out and formatted a similar thing to say that if the online session subscription was £5, the owners believe that there could be up to 80 students because they've got Zoom and they can run this and they've paid for a Zoom membership, so they know that. So they can cover more people, which increases massively the sessions, the amount per session. They're still going to be running 2 sessions per day like they always were. So over to this table, per session, they should hopefully be pulling in £400. Then obviously per day, it's 800. And then weekly, because obviously it's 5, that is 4,000, and it's a massive leap. So they're going to be making £16,000 a month just from those online sessions. So that's a number that we're going to take. So ideally, it's a case of taking that number into budget template C and saying that from April onwards, it's going to be 16,000. And because we don't know any different in terms of any other movement, we're going to put that in for the rest of the year. Just going to take this out, sorry. So we know that. So we've taken out the income from the studio we're not expecting. We've added in the income from the online session subscriptions. We've got the business interruption loan. Now, we're saying that this is going to cover from April to July.
And if my internet's a bit iffy, but more often than not, in some of these cases as well, they might not jump to like 80 students from month one. So you might find, you know, April, it might be 40 students, and then by June, it might be up at that 80, but you can work, you can phase in transitioning of new services.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we're working on a hypothetical example here. And as I say, you're not going to see consistency like we have. It's more about the methodology. It's more about approaching the budget and understanding how the template, once done, can be altered and changed to reflect your conditions, to also play around with different scenarios and give you an understanding of where the business would be. This is a highly positive one. It's quite nice to do something positive because it's been quite miserable for the past couple of months looking at all the numbers I have been looking at. So it's quite nice.
The optimistic approach.
Absolutely, you know, we're all going to come through this fine. We're all going to come through this fine. But the business interruption loan, we were told, is effectively going to cover the cost, the missing cost of the studio session incomes. So what we can do is we can say that we know that that's going to be, typically that would be 5,760, and that's only going to be from the period of April through to July. So I'm going to copy that across and put that in, and that gives us obviously £23,000 there. There's going to be 144,000 made from the online, and the merchandising, because obviously it can be sold online, is going to be exactly the same. We don't believe that's going to change. We've got no information to the contrary. Moving further down, we know that the executive directors are saying that they're going to cut their pay by half. So obviously we haven't split the people out into 3 separate lines, which we could have done, but at the moment we're just going to divide this by 2 because we're going to take half of that cost. And then we've been told that that's for the rest of the year, so we know that's going to happen. That's automatically affected the executive directors. It's also affected the employers' NI and the pensions ratios. So as you can see, when they're receiving £1,500 as a total on the executive director's line, the national insurance and the pensions were 282 and 61. Now with the fall of them in half, that national insurance from April onwards has fallen to 178 and 39 because it should just be percentage of the total basic. So that's there. The fixed costs, we've not been told about any negotiations about them being able to have a rent period, rent break, or any relief on that at the moment. And then with the utilities, we've been told that they're going to stop. So I'm just going to take this colour off here. And we're told that actually we're not going to incur these from April onwards because the studio itself is actually shut. The one thing that we are going to incur, however, is the standing charge. So the detail for the standing charge, and this is where you sometimes go back and forth, was given to us when we looked through budget A. So we were given details. So on the workings, this is where a new workings come in. So where you can see anything in pink, you can see that there's a detail of the business interruption loan. And then if you go further down on working 6, again, highlighting this pink colour, this is just the amendment to say we are told the utilities are not charged or expected to until the end of the year. So we can take these down to the standing charges, which are fixed, which are the fixed element for 9 months. To calculate this, you need the monthly charge from the 6 months actuals, taking in the workings from budget A. So we know from the workings in budget A that the full year was 240. We know that the 6 month standing charge that we had from the half year totals was £30. So we know that the monthly charge is going to be 5, electric, gas, and gas 4 and 3. So those are the unavoidable costs that we have for them. So you can copy those and put those straight in to here without 55 different decimal places going through. Bear with me, sorry. So we have that there. And we can copy those on for the rest of the year because that's what we believe is going to happen. So we don't believe we're going to incur any charges for the utilities, but we will have to pay the standing charges. So we can see there the movement from what we forecast to the beginning of the year to how it's going to shift toward the end of the year. We can see how the total will shift. We can see how our expenditure is affected. And then if we go down to the bottom, I mean, this is a highly positive example. And what you can see is, yes, initially when we were just running the personal sessions and we were just running the studio sessions, it's 4,140. But now having transitioned to online and being innovative and, you know, looking at new methods of interacting with the clients, they've managed to sort of pull in a much greater income. And that's also bolstered within this period by the interruption loan that you can see from April onwards. And that obviously, in this example, in this hypothetical example...
Do you know what, Paul? I was just going to say, although you could look at this and kind of roll your eyes and think, oh God, how ridiculous. Actually, I've been working with the Old Abbey Tap House. And initially I looked at that and I just chuckled to myself. But when I put it into reality, the Old Abbey Tap House, we sat down, we looked at what they were doing. I've totally redone their business model with them in order to apply for one of the GMCVO social investment loans because they were in a position where they felt they could take on a loan to help them grow. This was before COVID even hit. They'd made that decision, and we worked through the plans. And actually, the 2 or 3 new income streams that they've adapted, and obviously they're doing a little bit online. They've developed a radio station. They're doing some bits and bobs, but their main income is coming in through a Meals on Wheels service. Doing some mutual aid stuff that they're being paid a new contract for, and what are the other things? Trying to remember. Yeah, adapting their outdoor events and various other things, and actually the new income streams that they've developed have worked. The doors on the pub were able to open, how long for I don't know, but the doors have opened sooner than they were expecting, so they're making more income through the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and you know, selling you know, food through Just Eat and places like that, Deliveroo and things that they weren't doing before, selling through the Meals on Wheels service to people who can pay for it, as well as doing a Meals on Wheels service through a contract to people who can't. And by the time the doors open, or we get back to some form of new reality, a bit like the case in this yoga studio, if we were to go forward and look at year 2 now, actually some of these online sessions and some of these other things that they're building in will remain. And then they'll have additional income from being able to open their doors again. So in the case of the Old Abbey Tap House, these new and innovative methods that they found to generate income through will remain, and their business certainly what we put in the plans and what we expect to happen is that in years 2 and 3, a lot of the income that they've generated through adapting their business will remain, in addition to being open as a you know, as a pub, or in this case a yoga studio, again with that weekly, monthly income that they were having before through direct sales or sessions or whatever. So it's an interesting time, if you choose to see it that way, for really creating a step change in your business model, as well as frantically adapting, covering cash flows and various other things, and being well informed to do that. So I just throw that in there as a kind of backup.
Absolutely. I appreciate that many people think this is, we're working through a hypothetical example here. We're trying to get through an idea about how budgets work and how they can be affected and changed. And yes, this is a highly positive example, but as you just mentioned, there are a lot of companies out there that have capitalized on this period to be able to diversify the way they interact with their clientele or the way that they work. And those that innovate have actually been able to do really well out of it.
Well, and if anything, here as well, though, good, and it's, you know, it's me doing a morag and sort of spotting something that's not in here that would need to be in here in reality, and other people will have in their expenditure list, is marketing and promotion. And there's some adaptations and some budget injections potentially needed around changing the way you market and promote yourselves, be that physically, be that through digital means, social media, or using alternative marketing methods to reach that 80 yoga pupils.
I mean, this was also based upon like the realistic idea that the first thing is that athleisure actually went up. So the idea about the merchandising and yoga pants, etc. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking we could actually have said that they were going to go up because more people have more time to do a bit more self-care and be more into fitness. If it was a remote session, they're probably more likely to join it rather than go, and they had more time to do it. So it wasn't beyond the realms of complete impossibility, even though it is a hypothetical example, because I think some companies, and as you say, correctly marketed and innovatively marketed, have actually managed to kind of really do that and survive. And I mentioned that because obviously within the news, other industries are really now looking out for different ways to diversify to get the outreach to people. So if it's a service, we're all sat here today on Zoom, and this would have been far more difficult to coordinate in a pre-COVID situation with people coming to a given venue and listening to me talk in front of the room. It gives us far more flexibility. There's probably a greater chance that you join this rather than take the time out to travel into the centre of Manchester, perhaps, to come to a session. So there are different ways of that businesses are being affected, and within the range of businesses that I see, it's a case of those that are innovative and those that are also having a look at how they can reach people in different ways are surviving, to be fair. But it's not beyond that, and I just want to try and paint something positive because I know it's very depressing and dire in many ways. But
this now is that now that people have seen or can evolve their own sort of templates in the way that they adapt what they do, those figures can change to whatever they need to be, whether it's 80, whether it's 40, whether it's 25, and you can soon start to see in the profit and loss lines, what's happening where you've got difficult months coming up, or something's just physically not viable.
Yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, if we look at this with the COVID example, I mean, this shows greater seasonality. If we just have a look at that, you can see that they were making 4,000 profit per month, and obviously with the business interruption loan and also the rise of the online subscribers, that goes up to 21,000. When the business loan falls, that sort of steadies out at another 15,000. And again, yes, we're assuming that that's going to continue for the rest of the year, but the likelihood is that will probably tail off in a given couple of months. But it gives you an idea. It's just a tool. This is nothing more than a tool to help you make decisions and understand where you are. So Dee, for example, asked earlier, and other people have asked about how they can. This is a tool that's going to give you an idea about how much money you need to make in that given month. It's going to give you an idea about potentially where your costs are too high. It's going to give you an idea about actually where's a gap in any of my funding or my income streams. How do I need to bridge that? That's why it's important, because it's not just something that you do for funders or an exercise that is almost obligatory. It's there to help you make those decisions. It's there to provide clarity for your strategy and for you to have an idea. And many companies are revising their budgets now due to COVID and going, right, we won't be able to offer services in the same way, and the landscape will change as a consequence. But it's only through doing this exercise, it's only with them sitting down and being honest and logical about what they're doing and saying, right, we're not going to have this much money in, we're going to have to take pay cuts here, we're going to maybe not have these expenditures, but we're also not going to see these incomes, that they're able then to understand how that schedule works for them and what it says about their future. So that will then direct what their change in strategy will be. And that's why keeping on top of this and making sure that it's current and that you implement the changes that you're aware of means that it becomes your best friend. We talked about that. It really does become that, because you can start seeing into the future what the patterns may be like. Yes, you're not going to get them completely accurate all the time, and you're not expected to. That's the key thing. No one is expecting 100% perfect budget to match your actuals. That's incredibly weird, or it's fixed. But it's there as a guide.
Fab. And I know, but we're going to open out for further questions, further thoughts. There's probably a few further things we want to sort of discuss and think about as well. But before we do, I was just going to come back to, is it Lucy? Lucy's point, where she did bring it up before about VAT, and she's just sort of reminding us around, would this company need to add VAT into their cost, in their expenditure? And if so, how and where? Or, perhaps just if you just share a little bit, thinking around that?
Well, the whole thing with that, typically with an income and expenditure budget, you wouldn't. It depends on different companies. Within this company here, I haven't shown VAT as an expenditure, as a payment out, because we're looking to try and understand what the incomes and the expenditures are. Typically on the P&L, obviously, the profit and loss schedule, you see that through. We could easily, on the expenditure, put VAT down there, and the VAT would just be a proportion of, it would be a brief calculation of all the sales that we had and all the outputs. So you'd sort of say, right, for everything that we've sold, whether it's the T-shirts or whether it's a service, if we do charge VAT on that, obviously consultancy, etc., does take VAT because you're providing a good or a service. Then obviously you could sort of build in a VAT line under income to say this is what the VAT is on all the income. You could build in a line on expenditure to say this is my VAT on all the things that I've purchased, and you'd have a net value for them that you believe that you're due to pay out, whether you're paying out or you're reclaiming. So it's possible to do that, and it's the addition of the lines, and that's why I'm saying that this as a format is something which is used as a guide, and you can expand this and build it, and you could technically have the executive directors all on a separate line as well. But the VAT, when it comes out in terms of a cash flow payment as well, normally on budgets, especially budgets I've used on SMEs and big companies, you don't show the VAT on the income and expenditure the budget. It's an incidental cash flow that is maintained, because obviously on the sales you're charging the VAT, and on the expenditure you've paid it. So from a net perspective, if you're calculating that on the income and expenditure, you're showing the difference of the 20% that you're paying and the 20% you're recovering, or the 5% that you're recovering.
So, and I was just going to say,
I apologise. I hope that makes sense, because I understand it's a tricky way, and I can't show it on schedule. But I'm happy to answer questions after this. Are you happy to email me, and I'm happy to run through that if need be.
And I guess, like you were saying there, you could create a line. You could create a line in where, let's say, VAT, you were needing to put, calculate that VAT on T-shirts, yoga pants, and mugs. You could create a sum, which was some C 13, 14 and 15 divided by 20%, or whatever the calculation is.
Yes, absolutely.
You'd create that line in there.
Yeah, of course you would.
It sounds like follow up with Lucy directly will be possible there, so we can delve into that a bit deeper. As I say, certain social enterprises, that won't be a thing for right now, especially if people are starting out. But at the same time, is it? Forgive me, because it's changed over the years. Is it about £80,000 turnover? 85,000. Yeah, until you get to the point where you're turning over £85,000, you don't need to start worrying about becoming VAT registered. But these things do crop up on you. Over the years, we're flourishing getting to the point where we're near, this year or next, we've got to make some decisions on, do we want to head over that threshold or not? And in some years might be busy years, and other years not. So it's a real consideration for a growing social venture, to kind of how they want to approach that. And certainly for those that are already over that threshold, it's got to be looked at and considered. So Gurj will follow up there. We've been having bits of feedback in the chat, which is great. So thank you. And there was a good point there about links. We spotted a second ago, linking the spreadsheets, a reminder of the formula would be useful. So I think, I don't know if you can. Yeah, so do you want to, I could run through that really quickly now. So in terms of the link, is it a link to the workings or the link on the sheet? Do you want to come off, if you want to come off, well, that's kind of, come to this kind of formal part.
Both.
Both
would be useful.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those links between the spreadsheets, because I think that would be incredibly handy for a lot of us, but I don't know how to do that. Sure.
I know we've mentioned this previously as well, because a lot of people have asked. I think it might even be worthwhile just doing another follow-up session, just with the templates and just on Excel, just to literally run through the examples of how that works in. I'm conscious, obviously, that we've run through things, and we've run through quite a lot of material today. But if there's sufficient demand, please get in touch with myself and Kayla, and we can try and set something up for that, just to run through. For example, we could even use these templates, but then just go through the different ways it can be linked, because as we were showing, it really does make your life a lot easier once you start putting the changes in. It's a bit of short-term pain for a bit of long-term gain, really, and it's when you're setting the template up and doing all the workings if you do the hard work there, it
Yeah.
makes
Did you want to
difference.
just give just a quick example between one working one and one cell, so people can at least see how the two things?
Yeah. So what I've got here, so we've hard copied those cells in, but this is a particular example here. So on the branded T-shirts on the sheet that you can see in here, that's £500, and what that is, that's a link into the budget workings. So if you have a look in the top of the screen, you'll see in the white box, the big long rectangle, the formula there, and it says equals budget workings CG $32. Please don't be scared by that or confused by it. All that says is it's picking up from a tab. If you have a named tab, it'll identify what that named tab is. So I'm going to show you how I did that, and literally all that is, so I could take that out, and all I did was put an equal sign in that particular cell, and then I clicked onto another tab, and as you move up, you've got your working 3 for merchandise and clothing. So we know it's T-shirts, we want the forecast monthly sales. I click on that cell, and I just hit the enter button, and it brings that value in there. So now, just as an example, if I was to change, because all these other cells are linked to the same cell, if I were to change that budget working now, so if I was to change this cell that it's linked to £800, for example, I can click that there, and on the budget template, as you can see, because they're all linked, they've all altered to 800, and the totals have picked up the difference as well.
Cool. Hopefully that helps there. So yeah, we've
it's a very short run through. I appreciate it's a very short run through, but hopefully that helps just to illustrate how it can work.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember learning how to put these budget things together. It was when I worked back for Bubble Enterprises years ago. I remember them working me through, and it is a bit of a it takes a bit to get your head around and getting comfortable with using some of the formulas, but you only need to know a handful. It's not this big mystery. As I said last time, I only got a C in maths for my GCSEs, but I do like patterns and numbers, and I certainly like to be able to create profit to reinvest in communities. And I think when you keep that in the back of your mind with any of this budgeting, number calculating, forecasting stuff, and if that's not normally your area of forte and you'd much rather be out in the community, much rather designing new programs and so forth, without getting these kinds of figures right, and without being able to confidently plan and realistically plan for your future, you can't you can't operate effectively, and you can't operate profitably to be able to make sure that you're there for the benefit of your community. So that's why we're so keen to put these kinds of sessions on. So what I'll say at this point is big thank you to Gerd. We're going to do a quick Q&A because there is time. But would you mind just flipping back to the PowerPointy thing?
Not at all.
If you flip, all as I was just going to say is big thanks to Gerd on that. Hopefully that's, last time it was quite a basic level of thinking and just running through what our budgets, how do they work, really getting people to think about the honesty, the granularity, and how to start to structure things and what to remember to include. This time, hopefully we've really pushed things along a little bit in terms of making those budgets and cash flow forecasts work at different levels, and you can make those as complicated or as simple as you need for the stage of business that you're at. And like Gerd says, there's a kind of version that you have for your workings out, and then there's versions that you share with your board or with your funders, and often what will happen is that you'll have your working documents and the stuff that you use to kind of track what's happening. You'll have another version that's the actuals. You'll have what's actually happening that you'll be inputting and updating on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whenever basis. But you may also produce, as some of you will already be doing, specific budgets and cash flows for funders. And certainly once you start looking at larger grants, £25,000 plus, sometimes £15,000 plus, they want to start seeing these 2 to 3 year, or even in some cases 5 year cash flow projections. And so you have to get comfortable with, getting your crystal ball out and imagining, what you want the future to look like physically and financially. So we will keep, running sessions around finances and financial planning. And as Gerd says, we can do stuff that's tailored to specific needs, particularly around Excel. If you just flick the thing on one more, and then we'll come back to the Q&A.
Sure. So
sorry.
I just wanted to give you that at the bottom. I mean, it's the same thing that we had in part one. I'm genuinely happy to speak to people from the session. There's an email there at the bottom in yellow, but you can also get in touch with Michaela and she'll forward things on to me on the Flourish email. If you do have any questions, or if you want to follow through with anything, or you want me to run through something else separately, happy to do that. And then we've got this for the podcast series.
To wrap up me chatting really, so that we can get on with the Q&A, and there are a couple of questions coming through and some ideas. So just to say, for anyone who's not aware, you know, Flourish is obviously there. We're running a range of programs at the moment. A number of our programs are aimed at supporting you know, women who are running social enterprises, looking at developing their leadership, enterprise, or even employability and skills. We work with women on all sorts of levels, but then we will continue to run our monthly peer learning events and networking events that are open to all. We've got a conference that we're going to be running next year. We haven't currently got our events calendar planned for autumn onwards. We're kind of taking a bit of a breather over the summer, and we'll have our events calendar live in the next few weeks with a range of monthly peer learning sessions. Some will be happening via Zoom, as we have been doing, and there will actually be some physical events, all being well, that we've got planned starting you know, in September onwards. But in the meantime, our podcast series, although you know, it's women supporting social enterprise, there's all sorts of anecdotes, stories, and we're trying to design these podcasts so that they're both a training and learning tool, as well as sort of inspiring stories from different people running social enterprises across Greater Manchester and beyond. So you're very welcome to catch up on those, and I'll send information about that. You'll have my email address, and we're obviously on Twitter, but keep in contact, and we'll be emailing you. Yes, we will be sharing the templates, and we will have this recording going onto YouTube as soon as I can get it there. I think this one will actually get on quicker than the last one because it's kind of neat and tidy, and I'm not going to edit it in quite the same way. So we'll have a listen again option to this very soon. But other than that, from us at Flourish, we hope people have a great summer, and I'll just hand back to Gurj. So if you want to flip back your Q&A slide, and we'll just, if people need to leave, because I'm conscious we're nearly at 12, don't worry, don't feel you're held hostage. But I'm going to stop our recording, and we'll move into Q&A there, and we can look at some individual cases. I think me and Gurj are probably fine for another 15 minutes or so. So I will